Hello and welcome to SAR Histories, where on the channel today we will be visiting one of England's most historical sites, Kenilworth Castle. Kenilworth was a royal castle for most of its history, and many of the buildings remain unaltered since the reign of Elizabeth I. Its walls enclose a series of outstanding works of medieval and early Renaissance architecture. The first castle was established on a low sandstone hill at the crossroads of two ancient trackways in the 1120s by the royal chamberlain Geoffrey de Clinton. De Clinton built most of the Norman Great Tower and also founded Kenilworth Priory close by. In the early 13th century, King John added an outer circuit of stone walls and a dam to hold back a great lake, thus creating one of the most formidable fortresses in the kingdom. It withstood a full-scale siege in 1266. Subsequently, the castle was developed as a palace. John of Gaunt, son of Edward III, constructed the Great Hall with associated apartments and services. In the 15th century, the castle was a favoured residence of the Lancastrian kings, who were drawn here by the excellent hunting. Henry V built a retreat called the Pleasance of the Marsh at the far end of the lake. In 1563, Elizabeth I granted the castle to her favourite Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester. He converted Kenilworth into a great house for her entertainment, which culminated in 19 days of festivities in 1575. The castle's fortifications were dismantled in 1650 after the Civil War, and Leicester's gatehouse was converted into a residence by the parliamentarian officer Colonel Hawkesworth. Later, the ivy-clad ruins became famous for the setting of Sir Walter Scott's 1821 novel Kenilworth, which romanticised the story of Robert Dudley and Elizabeth I. The castle was given by Lord Kenilworth to the town of Kenilworth in 1958, and since 1984 it is being managed by the English Heritage. Through the porch of Leicester's gatehouse is the ground floor. The southern room, approached through the wooden screen to the right, contains Elizabethan panelling and fine alabaster fireplace. These were relocated here after 1650 and give the best impression today of the Elizabethan fittings in the apartments of the castle. On the first floor of the gatehouse is the Oak Room and a small museum which was once lodging. On the second floor is an exhibition of the castle, but filming is not allowed in that area. In this area you will also find the museum of the local motor industry magnate Sir John Siddeley. In 1244, the custody of Kenilworth Castle was given to Simon de Montfort, who was given the castle for life in 1253. When Simon was granted Kenilworth, it was already an exceptional fortress, but he is reported to have strengthened it further. A chronicler notes unheard of machines at the castle, probably the trebuchets, that were to play a significant role on both sides in the siege of 1266. The turning point in Simon's life came in 1258, when he headed the Confederacy of Reforming Barons against Henry III, a fatal decision that led to a defeat and death at the hands of the royal forces at the Battle of Evesham on the 4th of August 1265. After Evesham, some of his followers made a last stand at Kenilworth. De Montfort's eldest son Simon the Younger promised to surrender Kenilworth to the king, but his father's supporters inside refused. Henry III's patience finally snapped after his messenger returned with a severed hand. An all-out siege began on the 25th of June 1266, with the garrison now commanded by Sir Henry de Hastings, an outstanding leader who would maintain the defenders' morale through the great deprivation during the next 6 months. The king's forces were unable to breach the fortified walls, and the siege quickly became a stalemate. A parliament was called by Henry III near the castle, which resulted in the dictum of Kenilworth, which would permit the rebels to regain fortified lands on payment of heavy fines. Eventually, disease and starvation brought about what the assault had failed to. The remnants of the garrison surrendered on these favourable terms on the 13th of December 1266. Immediately after the surrender, Henry III granted Kenilworth to his younger son Edmund, who was created Earl of Lancaster in 1267. Thus began 200 years of ownership by the House of Lancaster, who were successively earls, dukes and kings, and were responsible for the distinctive development of the castle as a palace. John of Gaunt, the fourth son of Edward III, was the greatest nobleman in late medieval England and the most ambitious builder at Kenilworth since King John. In 1359 he married Blanche, younger daughter of Henry, Duke of Lancaster, and acquired Kenilworth Castle on her father's death in 1361. In 1362 Gaunt was created Duke of Lancaster and took possession of his wife's vast Lancastrian estates. Blanche died in 1368, and in 1371 Gaunt entered into a marriage of political convenience with the daughter and heiress of Pedro I, the recently assassinated King of Castile and Leon in Spain. From January 1372, Gaunt titled himself King of Castile and Leon. Thus, from the early 1370s, Gaunt literally required accommodation fit for a king. It is no coincidence that major works are recorded at Kenilworth from about 1373 until 1380. Such was his wealth that comparable works were underway simultaneously at several other of his properties. The ascension of Henry Bolingbroke, Gaunt's son, as Henry IV brought the title and estates of the Duchy of Lancaster to the crown. Kenilworth became a favoured residence of the Lancastrian kings, and it was while staying at Kenilworth that Henry V received the insulting gift of tennis balls from the French, reportedly provoking the campaign which led to the famous victory at Agincourt in 1415. The first reference to a garden at the castle is in John of Gaunt's time in 1374, and Edward IV in 1463 commanded a jousting place to be made in the middle of a garden. Both these references may be to the site of the present-day garden, and almost certainly in 1575 garden was not the first in its location. It is likely that features such as the marble fountain and aviary were created in 1575, giving their relative novelty in England, while others, such as the earthwork of the terrace, were already in existence. In 1975, a Tudor garden was planted on the site, based on Sir William Dugdale's plan of 1656. It became evident that the plant roots were destroying what archaeology remained. So, in 2004, English Heritage commissioned research to inform a more authentic recreation of the 1575 garden. Henry VI and his Queen were frequently at Kenilworth in the 1450s, as the Midlands assumed a key role of the War of the Roses. This interest continued after the victory of Bosworth Field of Henry Tudor in 1485, who as Henry VII was a regular visitor to the castle. Their son Henry VIII picked out Kenilworth as one of 3 ancient castles in the kingdom which he wished to see maintained. John Dudley and his 4th son Robert were granted Kenilworth Castle in 1553 and in 1563, and had a major impact on the buildings we see today. The Dudleys rose to prominence through service to the Tudor monarchy over 3 generations, and on 2 occasions might have become kings of England themselves. John Dudley integrated himself with Henry VIII through military service and became the dominant force in the reign of Henry's son Edward VI. He became Earl of Warwick in 1547 and the Duke of Northumberland in 1551. His coup to oppose the succession of the Catholic Mary Tudor, by prompting his daughter-in-law Lady Jane Grey, ended in his execution in 1553 and Jane's in 1554. The family recovered from this setback, and with the ascension of Mary's sister Elizabeth I, the 2 surviving sons, Robert and his elder brother Ambrose, slowly acquired offices, titles and estates. Robert was the courtier on the most intimate terms with Elizabeth during the first half of her reign, sharing her passion for riding and dancing. She considered marrying him on several occasions. A stable is documented at the castle from at least the early 14th century, but the present building was erected in 1553 for John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland. Described in the 1563 survey as a very fair and strong new stable which my Lord's Grace your father made. In length it is 180 feet and in breadth 21 feet. It remains an outstanding survival from a period when grand stable buildings were becoming the fashion. From 1650 until the Victorian period, the building continued in use as a stable and barn, as part of the farm established in the base court. The Earl of Lancaster died in 1588 without an heir, and almost 20 years of legal and family wranglings ensued before, early in the reign of James I, the castle reverted to the crown. In 1612 it was conveyed to the future Charles I. At Charles's marriage in 1626, the castle formed part of the marriage portion of his new queen, Henrietta Marie, and was held in the stewardship for her by Robert Carey, Earl of Monmouth. In October 1642, soon after the beginning of the Civil War, Charles I withdrew the royal garrison from Kenilworth after the indecisive Battle of Edge Hill. The castle was then occupied by the parliamentarians and remained largely unscathed. Following the uprisings of 1648, however, prompted by the imprisonment of Charles I, Parliament hardened its attitude to the destruction of all former royalist strongholds. The ensuing abandonment of castles as major residences was one of the most decisive changes in the history of the English landscape. During 1649, several parliamentary orders were issued for the slighting of Kenilworth, but Henry Carey, 2nd Duke of Monmouth, successfully petitioned that it be slighted with as little spoil to the dwelling house as might be. Colonel Joseph Hawkesworth, the commander who had overseen the slighting for Parliament, acquired the estate in lieu of back payments for the local militia. He retained the castle for himself and converted Leicester's gatehouse into a residence, which in due course became the house for a farm established in the bottom end of the base court. At the restoration of Charles II in 1660, Hawkesworth was evicted. The castle was restored to Charles's mother Henrietta Maria, and for a short time to the stewardship of the Earls of Monmouth. At the start of the 19th century, the ruins were allowed to decay, and in August 1817, 30 tons of stone crashed down from the northwest turret of the Great Tower. Later in the century, the growing appreciation of ruins as monuments combined with the destructive aspects of mass tourism, led to efforts to arrest the decay of the castle's buildings and to investigate its history more scientifically. Substantial restorations continued in the late Victorian period and between 1926 and 1936. Lord Clarendon spent a further £10,000 but found he could not keep up with the necessary maintenance. So in 1937 the castle was bought for the nation by the local motor industry magnate Sir John Sidney, who was created First Lord of Kenilworth in the same year. Sidney retained the gatehouse to live in, but in 1938 placed the castle in the guardianship of the Commissioners of His Majesty's Works, giving £5,000 towards the cost of repairs. In 1958, his son, the second Lord Kenilworth, gave the castle to the town of Kenilworth. The town council remains the legal owner. In 1984, English Heritage, the distant successor of His Majesty's Office of Works, became responsible for the care of the castle and manages and maintains it today. Though Kenilworth is only a shell of its former glory, it is no less worthy of admiration. It is easy to spend a whole day exploring the ruins and wondering what it must have been like at its height. During my visit, there was a medieval event on, with battles and a living encampment. This I will do a separate video on. Kenilworth has a long and exciting history, which makes it a must visit for those that like a good castle, or history. If you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Until then, goodbye.